Right, welcome everyone. This is now session 5. So we're going to essentially finish off the exercise that we've been working on for the past couple of sessions, where we're actually producing or developing some new materials. Just before we continue with that, I just wanted to perhaps just revisit the learning schedule, just to sort of let you know where we are in the program. So session 5, we're here today at session 5, so we're going to finish off the materials, complete the exercise on materials. And I'm hoping later in this session we'll actually start a new exercise which I'm calling a rendering practice exercise. And what that is essentially a preparation for the first assessment task. Okay, so and I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the session. So that's a completely new exercise. So as I say, for the first part of the session, I'd just like to finish off the this materials exercise. Now, I think where we left off last week was we had created 2 paint materials, or at least one, and I think I did the second one very quickly. And I did ask you to finish the other 3 yourself. Okay, so has everybody done that? Good, okay. So my intention today is to actually finish off the remaining 2 materials. I know there are more, but I just wanted to cover the last 2, which essentially, if we move forward to exercise 4-4 on page 35, so that's where we're going to pick up today. So I'm going to sort of take you through and show you how to create CT1 and PRT1, okay, a porcelain tile and a ceramic tile material. If you want to create the CT2 and the PRT2, that's entirely up to you. You can do that, but I just want to take you through those 2, and then we'll move on. Just before we do, if I just go back to the paint materials. With your paint materials, could I get you to just quickly rename them? And what I'll get you to do is actually rename them and actually add the colour, not necessarily the paint code, but the colour of each one. After the PT1, so PT1- classic ivory, PT2- grizzle grey, PT3- ceiling bright white, for instance, so that when you're looking at the colours, looking at the, I guess, the description, you'll know basically what those colours are, rather than trying to work out what PT1, PT2 is. So, in your Revit project, in the exercise project file, if you open up your materials browser, now also just make sure that you have your library panel showing, this one here, so this one down here, so you can actually see your own personal library. Now, I guess the thing is, now that you've come back to class, if you've been working on the library in another physical location, I guess the question is, can you see your library here in this lower panel? So at the moment we've got 3 flooring materials, they being the carpet and the 2 paint materials. So I've actually named these ones down here, PT1 classic ivory and PT2 grizzle grey. Now, if I do a search up here for, do a search with the letters PT, it shows me my carpet materials and also the 5 materials that I've produced, the 5 paint materials. So, A, can you rename them? And B, can you make sure you add them to your library, please? Yeah. Okay, so right mouse, add to, library, paint. Okay, so we now essentially have 8 new materials. Yeah, that's a good point. If you have already added your materials from the project to the library, and they're just showing us PT1, PT2, PT3, PT4, of course you can't edit the materials down here once they're in the library. To make changes to them, you'd have to add them. Well, if they exist in the project, you can make changes to them up here and then re-add them to the library. But you're going to have to delete the older versions in the library. Okay, I don't know that you can overwrite. I don't know that you can overwrite because they will have different names. So it would be I guess wise to actually delete them from the library, providing they're up here, of course. Delete them from the library first, rename them up here, and then re-add them to the library, because it's not possible to actually change the materials once they're in the library. So you can't make any changes to them. So if you have to make a change to a material, you'll have to add it back to the project, make a change to it, and then add it back to the library. Okay?
You can rename it in the library, can't you?
No, you can only delete or add to the document.
I'll just rename them in my library.
It's not giving me a rename option. So if I right mouse on this one, I only have these options here. Rename is greyed out. I can rename up here when it's in the project. I can, I'll obviously do what I like up here, but not when it's in the. Oh, yeah, sorry, my apology. That's come up as rename.
You just cannot rename the one you picked up, highlighted.
Oh, now it's actually okay.
You need to select another one and then do that. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. So. Yeah, I'm not sure what it's doing there. Is it just me? Because that one's allowing me to rename, but these other ones aren't. So.
Once you've clicked on it, selected it, you can't rename it, but if you right mouse click, it works.
Okay. That's doing my head in. Yeah. Okay.
Do you want us to change it in the project as well?
Well, the thing is, ultimately, I'd like the materials to be completely correct in the library. Okay, but yes, obviously in the project as well. Ultimately, once we have developed these materials, the entire collection, we're going to add them to the library, and once that's occurred, there is no longer any need to keep the project. Okay, once we have the materials secure down here, so the project we can sort of we can save it, we can keep it, but there's no need to go back to it once we've got our library established. But yes, it would make sense to sort of, obviously, I would perhaps, make all your changes up here in the project and then update the library with the most current versions of these materials from the project. Okay. Now, the other thing I'm going to ask all students to do, and this includes all the external students from both units, is I'd like you to, once we have completed the last two materials, I'm going to ask all students to email me your library. Okay? So I'd like everyone to email me their library that they've finished. So what I want to see is the 3 carpets, the 5 paints, and the 2 tile materials. Okay? And I'd like to receive those before next Thursday. All right? All right, so we'll move on. Now, if we come back to the this exercise here, so if you haven't already, just open up the this exercise, practice exercises, Revit Materials 2019 from the Learn site. So this one here. We're going to move forward now to part 2, which is, as I said, which is okay, so Revit Materials Concepts Applied Part 2, Exercise 4-4, which is on page 35. Now, the two materials that the materials that are described here are produced by a company called Dal Tile. And as we've done with the carpet and the paint, we're actually going to follow a link to the Dal Tile website and do a search for the first tile material, which is the X735 Almond. So, like I said, we're going to produce CT1 and later PRT1, just those 2 materials. Now, what I'll get you to do, just before we start working with CT1, so both materials are going to be produced in a slightly different way. The second one is going to be derived from a photograph or a bitmap or texture map. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is, just before we actually start either of them, I'd like you to go back to the Learn site to topic 2, down to the images here, the 3 carpet images, and then the 4th one here is the image that you'll need for PRT1, that second tile material. So can I get you to right mouse, do a save image as. Okay. Now again, I guess with the downloading of these images, I think some students are getting different different ways to download them. Just note that I'm actually using the browser Mozilla Firefox to do this. Okay. I would suggest that you don't use Internet Explorer, but use Firefox or Chrome. My preference is Firefox, okay, which is this browser here. So save image as, and just save it back to the folder that contains the other images. Which is again this texture maps folder. Okay, so in the texture maps folder, you'll now have the 4 separate JPEG files. So we'll just have this 4th one ready when we create that second material. Okay, so once you've done that, I'll get you to, if you haven't already, just go back into the material browser and filter the material list by class and select ceramic. So having done that, you should actually see two materials: ceramic tile 4-inch blue and porcelain ivory. Okay, so up here, project materials, ceramic, and you've got those two materials. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to make a copy of the ceramic tile 4-inch blue, and that will become our new material, which we're calling CT1. Okay, so you're going to make a copy of this top one. Okay, duplicate, and this is going to become CT1. And as we've done with the other materials, you're going to fill in the information here on the Identity tab. So these particular tiles are going to be used for the shower wall. So they're a shower wall tile. The manufacturer is Dal Tile, and the model is the X735 Almond. So in the exercise here, there is a link to the Dal Tile site, which is this one here. There's also a link to it here on the Learn page. So if we just digress slightly and then follow this link to the site itself, and up in the search box up here, if you put in X735 as a search criteria, now, having done this, my experience here is that you actually have to do do two searches. Okay, so when I say two searches, you have to actually click the little search thing a second time, and it will take you to the X735, the matte almond square, this one here. So when you've done that, just open up that sample . So there is quite a bit of information here. There's some different colours here, colour variations of the tile itself. You can mouse over the image here and have a closer look. The only thing is that there's a lot of information here, but nothing actually gives us the... and I might just add that we're going to generate this material using an artificial technique. We're not actually going to use a photograph to generate this tile material. And I guess in artificially generating it, what we need primarily is the colour of it, as in the RGB, but we're not given that. We do have the tile size. So the tile size that we're actually going to be working with, which is a 4¼ by 4¼ which is just over 200 millimetre, about 216 millimetre by 216. So unfortunately, we have to work with imperial sizes here, given that it's a US site. Revit does convert imperial to metric, and then it converts out to about 216 mil. So there isn't really much that we can gather from here, information-wise, for our new material, apart from coming up to the URL at the top and doing a Control-C, a copy, that we can then paste back into our material. So I'll just quickly put in the information here. Including down here under annotation the mark itself as CT1. So when you've done that, you're going to then move across to the Graphics tab. And I guess normally I would say tick the Use Render Appearance box, but in this case we're not. Okay, we're not going to tick this box. In fact, we're actually going to manually change the colour here, the shaded colour. So if you click on this this bar here to open up the colour dialog, and you're going to put in a new RGB down along the right here, and here, this is where we are. We're now on page 37. So it's step 15. Set the RGB colour to 231R, 220G, 202B. When you've done that, click the foreground surface pattern preview and select the model option, and then select 4.25 inch tile as the foreground pattern. In step 17, set the cut pattern to none. Okay, cut pattern to none. This one down here. Okay, so foreground here to 425 tile, and cut pattern foreground to none. Okay, so that's the shaded colour now. The foreground, if we click on the little swatch here, there should be I think a 4.25, maybe not. I think you'll have a 4.25. I think what I did was I actually change the name to 108. Yeah. So yeah, so sorry, my apology. A 4 inch, the 4¼ inch equals 108 millimetres, not 216. So sorry, the two tiles together are 216 mil approximately, but one tile is 108 or 4.25 inches. So what I've done here is I've actually, I think in your case you've got a 4.25, so select that one. Mine's a 108, I'm going to select that one. But if you have a look at if you edit the actual pattern, what I did was change it to 108 millimetre. The actual spacing, so it's a crosshatch, the spacing is 107.95, is that correct? In each case?
Mine's got 108.
108, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So we can change that to 108. Okay, so that sets up the foreground or the surface pattern. Now the cut pattern foreground, if you click on that swatch there, and just go up to the top of the list under pattern types and select no pattern. Okay, just click apply, but keep the browser open. So is everyone okay with that? It makes it difficult when we're sort of when the exercise is working in imperial and we're converting to metric. So having done that, so we've done identity, we've sorted out the graphics settings. We then go to appearance. So in this case, we're actually going to duplicate the asset. So this button here. Okay, so the one in the new appearance asset is the same name, but it has this one in brackets after it. Okay, so what we have to do immediately is go down to the information section and update the name of the appearance asset, and then just call it CT1. And under description, I suggest maybe putting in the X735 almond. Okay, so so Revit is treating this material as a ceramic, but I guess it's currently it's actually using a photograph or a texture map for the material itself. Now, it is possible to actually create or derive materials artificially. So, in other words, not using a texture map. And in this case, we're going to do just that. So next to the image here, you've got a little down arrow. And I'll get you to click that down arrow, which produces a list. So depending on what type of material you're creating, if you're going to do it artificially, you can actually choose from one of these lower options. Okay, so currently we have image ticked. So if we're going to produce a tile material, we go down to the tiles option and select that. Now that immediately puts us into the texture editor, which we have seen before. So whether it's artificially generated or it's a photograph that's being used, I guess essentially, as we found out, the only thing that we've done or changed in the texture editor in the past is what?
Change the size.
The scale. Yeah, so if we've previously been working with photographs, so we've had to actually change the scale. Okay, now in this case, we're actually going to change the number of tiles along the horizontal and the number of tiles along the vertical. So we're actually going to have 2 by 2. So that, in fact, is known as the tile count up here. So that's the first thing we do, is we actually change the tile count to 2 per row, 2 per column. Okay, so there's a few other things that we have to do. So essentially, to actually build this material or make changes within the texture editor, we have to specify the colour of the tile and the colour of the grout. And I guess, as I said previously, it would be useful to know what the RGB of both of those are so that we can actually just directly key them in. But we're not given that information. So again, you know, if you've got a photograph of the tile material, for instance, you could actually, you know, bring it into a photo editor and then use the picker option to actually extract the RGB as best you can. In this case, the RGB for the tile colour and the grout colour is given to us, so we can just key that information in. So we're talking about tile appearance and grout appearance, these two here. So it's just a matter of actually clicking on each of these and then keying in the RGB values. So that's actually given to us on the next page. Which is here. So here we're working in the texture editor, so that's now page 39. So the tile count 2 by 2, the tile appearance is the 231, 220, 202 for instance, and the grout is 99, 77, 61. So you'll see the change up in the preview up here, and then we go to the grout colour, and that one is the 99, 77, 61, which is a dark brown colour. Now, the only other thing that we need to do in for the tile appearance now is the scale itself. So the scale we need to change, and again over here the scale is listed in inches, so it's actually 8.5 inches. So if you can appreciate from the website, each tile was 4 1/4, so two of them is 8.5. Okay, so and again, I believe if we do the conversion, that becomes, you know, 2 by 108, which is 216. So
215.9.
215.9 in fact. And the thing is, in the sample, by the way, before you actually key this information and the sample size in here, just unlock the two. Just unlock the two here.
Why don't you want to keep them square? Why don't you want to
We
keep
do,
them square?
we do, but it's easier if you unlock this thing. It just has some unexpected results.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So I prefer unlocking and then just actually physically typing in the amount in both cases.
Curiosity, if the tile itself is a 4 1/4 by 4 1/4, and then you're going to put two together equaling the 8.5, don't you then also have to add a measurement for the thickness of the grout?
Yeah, you would have to. Yeah, technically you would have to allow, you know, maybe a couple of millimetres for the grout itself. Yeah. But I guess I guess the thing is here we're not, you know, we're not going to be millimetre perfect with this one. Yeah. So if you were actually were creating a tile material based on a photograph of a tile, how would you include the grout? Yeah, well, in fact, if you think about it, if you were going to use a photograph in this case, and it might only be one tile sample, you would effectively have to have grout on all four sides. because that's the way the material is produced by this repetition, this grid repetition. So you'd have to have a very thin line of grout on each side of those tiles, on each side of the tile, all four sides. And the thin line around the tile would have to be half of the grout thickness. So that when the tiles are put together, the two thin lines around each tile equals a single thickness of grout. So it's not an easy thing to do, of course, but of course you've got to get the right colour tile and you've got to get the right colour grout in the photograph itself. So to that end, what we're doing here makes a lot more sense. It's a lot easier to manage. So here, again, if I was to put in 8-1/2 inch, so 8.5 inch. Not that we should have to do this, but if I type that in and hit the tab key, it actually converts it to metric. So it becomes 215.9, and I think realistically we just need to round that up to 216 and 216 the other way. Okay, so 216 and 216. So that's all we need to do in the texture editor for the main appearance. So you can click done on that one. And there's our tile material, which has been artificially generated. Now, with this material, I'm just going to move forward now. When you are creating materials, such as brick or tile, or anything that has a grout or mortar, within the program or the text or the material editor, we have the ability to actually make the tile or brick look more realistic by giving it the illusion of, I guess, the grout or mortar being slightly set back from the surface of the tile. Okay, so you can see here that the image on the left looks far more realistic. So it has a relief, it has it has some depth to it. So the image on the left is far more realistic than the image on the right. Okay, this is very flat. Now, I guess to produce this effect or to create this effect, we have to introduce something called a relief pattern. Okay, and the relief pattern, really all it does is just emphasize the grout in this case, and it gives the appearance that the grout is slightly set back from the tile itself. So to give it more of a 3D effect. So as I in this image, highlight the difference in a rendered image when the relief pattern is used as seen on the left and when it is not on the right. The relief pattern, again, is another feature of the material. It's something else that we can actually incorporate. Actually gives the material a three-dimensional look. So the lighting in the space is actually in sync with the relief patterns as well. So notice how the shade and highlights correspond with the lighting primarily coming from the top right in the image on the left. The image on the right is flat and void, and any shading or highlights at the edge of at the edge of the tiles. So to actually, I guess, create that relief pattern, we go back to our material and we switch the relief pattern to a tiles pattern similar to steps 20 and 21. Now, the relief pattern, okay, if we go back to our Revit project, the relief pattern, if you can, yeah, sorry, I'm about to crash here, so I'm going to just pause for a moment. All right, sorry about that, we're back. Okay, so the relief pattern is this option down here. See how it's ticked? So if you expand relief pattern, click the button here. So again, you've got the relief pattern that we're currently looking at is the relief pattern that was used for the previous appearance asset. So again, we're going to click the arrow here and change the relief pattern to tiles as well. And we're going to go through this exactly the same process. However, the tile appearance, and I'll just change the tile count to 2 by 2. The tile appearance is going to be white, which as an RGB, you can pick white over here if you want. It just becomes 255 by 255 by 255. And the grout appearance is actually given to you in the PDF. So the tile appearance, so this is the relief pattern settings. So the tile appearance is white and the grout appearance is 21, 21, 23. Okay, so it's fairly dark. Now, I guess the darker the grout is in the relief pattern, the more the grout will stand out, or the more that you'll see a real stark difference between the grout and the tile itself in terms of its perceived depth.
What was the white tile number again?
You can just use this button here. That'll do it. Just pure white. Okay, so 21, 21, 23 is the grout for the relief pattern, and the only other thing you'll need to do there is actually just change the scale. So again, 216 by 216 to match the main tile appearance. Okay, so we've got our the main tile appearance, the colour here, and then we've got the relief pattern down here. So I'm just getting a bit nervous with this, so I'm actually going to click OK and just save my project. And it's probably, I guess, when you're working with materials like anything else in Revit, it's a good idea to sort of just exit the dialog and do interim saves. Although Revit's very good, as you can see, it does tend to crash, and the only time it does crash is when we're working with materials, I've found. So having a look at the, going back into this material, have a looking at the appearance tab or asset. If you just move up to the line up here, just below the preview, and you'll get a little icon there, double arrow. If you then drag that down, you'll actually get a better sample of the material itself. And I guess the thing is that you probably won't get the full appreciation of the material itself until you've actually assigned it to something within your model. You've set up some lights inside perhaps, and you do a high-res render. So that essentially, that is that first ceramic tile, CT1. So as I say, what I suggest you do perhaps at this stage is just save your project, and then we'll move on to the next one, which is the PRT1. So PRT1 is covered on page 44, step number 53. All right, so the next tile, the PRT1, if we go back to our tile list, okay, so PRT1 is a porcelain tile. It's used as a floor tile. Same company. Now the name of the tile is CY04 Downtown Night. Now I believe that it's actually a discontinued product because I couldn't find it on the website. Okay, so I guess it's just fortunate that I've got already got an image of it that we can use, which is the image you downloaded earlier from the Learn site. So I guess just note the name, which we need to put in, include in the identity information. So I guess it's going to be used as a floor tile, and that's the name of it there. So back to here. So essentially, to create this next material, we're going to duplicate CT1. We're going to enter the identity information, switch to the graphics tab, and then use render appearance for shading. So that needs to be ticked. And then we're going to set up a new pattern type, a model pattern type, called 18-inch tile. So if you can appreciate that that a single tile is, in this case, 18 inches, so it's a 1.5 feet. So it's about 450 millimeters, thereabout, just over 450 mil. So I guess the thing is that when we're creating this new pattern, we can key in 18 inches and Revit will convert to millimeters for us. So here, duplicate, PRT1, just open up the identity tab, and again this is a floor tile. The model is the CY04 Downtown Night. I'm not going to bother about, obviously because we can't go to the website and find the actual product, there's no point in actually updating the URL. Just put the under mark down here, just put in PRT1 to match the material name. And then across to the graphics tab, tick use render appearance. click on the foreground surface pattern. And what we're going to do here now is actually create a new model pattern type. Okay, so just by clicking this icon here, new fill pattern. Okay, everyone okay with that? Okay, so we're now with. Okay, click the foreground surface pattern. Pattern type is model. Click new. The name is 18-inch tile. And we're going to just set up the so essentially it's a crosshatch. So change the option to crosshatch and then enter the line spacing here. Okay, crosshatch, the angle is 0. Okay, so if you can appreciate that the angle obviously controls, so a 0 angle has vertical and horizontal patterning. Line spacing, so if we put in 18-inch there and 18-inch there. Now it won't automatically convert to metric until we actually click OK, and then go back and re-edit. So with it highlighted, click this button here, the pencil button, edit fill pattern, and you'll see that it's converted the spacing now to 457.2 each way. Okay, so you can key in the 457.2 directly if you want to. So that's the way we create a new custom pattern, in this case a basic pattern. Albeit very simple, so just for our tile material. So OK that, and there's our foreground or our surface pattern. Okay, so that's the graphics panel. So we then go to the appearance tab. Now, because this new material is very similar to the previous one, we're going to use the same type of appearance asset, which means that we can essentially make a copy of this appearance asset and then modify it. So again, over here, to duplicate the asset, in the information, just put in the description as the CY04 Downtown Night, and then change the name of the appearance asset to PRT1. Okay. So having done that, of course, this last material that we're working on is going to revert back to an image or a texture map. So down here in the ceramics section, okay, we go across to the right hand side to the drop arrow here to our options list, and we change the I guess the type or the tile back to image. So what that does is it takes us out to our folders, and it's now wanting an image file to use or replace the current. Okay, so you're just going to just navigate to your texture maps folder and then select this one here. Okay, so that now updates the preview up here. It's now using a texture map. So what we have to do next is actually now just go in and obviously, what do we have to do with this texture map? Scale it. Yep. So open it up in the texture editor. So if one tile is 457.2, then 457.2 or 18 inches, then two tiles is going to be twice that. So going back to the old imperial, two lots of 18 inches, 3 feet. So again, my apologies for working in the old system. So if we perhaps just come down to the scale section down here and put in 3 feet, so 3 feet like that, and hit the tab key, it roughly, well, it converts to about 914.4. Okay, so just pop in 914.4 for both. And click done. So that's taken care of the main or primary image. Now again, as we did with the previous material, we're actually going to use a relief map or relief pattern. Now the thing is that normally, if you use I guess as a rule, if you use an image for the primary material, or if you use an image for the main material, in this case with tiles and bricks and so forth, then what you then do is actually use an image for the relief pattern as well. And the image for the relief pattern is basically the same as the main texture map, but it's actually taken into a photo editor, and I guess the sample photo is changed to white, and then we actually sort of just have the black or dark grout lines as we're seeing here. So the image is copied and manipulated so that it's essentially black and white. Okay, we don't have that option here, and it's not really worth going through the process of doing it. I guess if you are looking for materials online for this reason, you might come across sites where they actually give you the main image and then the relief pattern image as well, so you can actually use those to generate a material within a program like Revit. So in this case, the best we can do is just retain the relief pattern as it is, i.e. artificially generated, but make some slight changes to it. So if you click directly on the image here for the relief pattern and take it into the texture editor, one of the first things you'll do, of course, is change the scale. So 914.4, wasn't it? Now on page, we go to page 46. Okay, page 46, step 72, edit the relief pattern as follows. Set the sample size to 3 feet, or in this case, nearly 915 mil. Set the grout colour to 125, 125 and 125. Okay, so grout appearance. So it's essentially the 125 by 125, 125 is a very dark grey rather than black. So as I say, the darker the grout colour in the relief pattern, the more emphasis you get, or you get that illusion or appearance of depth. Okay, so that's done. So we can click done on that one. Now the other thing that they're suggesting to do is to actually change the appearance or the type of presentation up here from a cube to under scene. So change from a cube. So this drop down here. So scene, and change the appearance to walls. And if you make that preview larger like that by dragging that line down, you can get a better idea of what that material is going to look like, either placed on a wall or in this case on a floor. So I'll just apply that, just save those settings. So that essentially is, okay, that's the completion of this last material. So we now have the 3 carpets, the 5 paints and the 2 tile materials. So just to finish off the exercise, if you can, in your own library, just create a new category and call it tile. Tile or tiles, it doesn't really matter. I think there's actually, under AEC, there's a tile category as well, so just call it tile. And if you change your if you just search or just filter by project materials here, if you select ceramic, you'll be able to see the CT1 and PRT1. So just again, just right mouse, add to materials, tile, right mouse, add to materials and tile. Okay, so the thing is that obviously when we finally get to the assessment, the first assessment, which is the rendering assessment, you're going to obviously access this library that you've produced, and if you obviously if you produce new materials in that project for the assessment, you'll then obviously add them to your own library here. And you may in fact, or will in fact, create additional categories and put those materials into those categories, obviously to obviously demonstrate the fact that you are managing that library in terms of materials and categories. So, as I said before, now that the library is complete to this stage, I'd like you all to email me your library so I can just have a quick look. All right. That includes external students. Okay, so we'll okay that. You can do a final save on the project itself. Now that the materials are safely tucked away in your own library, there's really no need to keep this Revit project file unless you want to. You can keep it, just keep it as a backup if you want to, but there's no need to access it anymore. So save it and close it, go back to the home screen. Yeah, so yeah, just sorry, good point. Just to clarify, the library, the file that you're sending me is the one that's contained in the material library folder, and it's this one here. Okay, it's a very, very small file. It just has the name that you've given it, plus the file extension ADSKLIB. Okay, just that single file.
The video is working, isn't it?
Sorry?
The actual video's working?
What video?
That one.
Oh, yes, yeah. Good. Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, we're recording. Yep, okay. Yep, so everyone send me that file, please, and I'll have a quick look. All right, so we're going to move on now. And I'll just minimise Revit for the moment. No, or just close this and close this. Okay. All right, so we're going to make a start on this next exercise, which, as I said at the beginning of the session, this exercise is going to, I guess, help prepare you for the assessment task. Now, where you'll find it is in topic 2, Revit materials, which we are here. If you scroll down to the very end of this section, you'll see practice exercise, all rendering tasks. Download the Revit file below to start and complete this exercise. So the Revit file itself is called pavilion-complete. So if you can just download that, you know, again for you know, better management of your files, you might want to create a new folder for this one. I'm not really fussed what you call that folder, but download it to a folder. Just so that you can keep track of it, you know where it is, a folder on your personal drives. Because we will be working on this, we'll start having a look at this today, and we will be working on this for the next few sessions. Okay, so once you've downloaded it, just open it up in Revit. Now, for you, it will go through an upgrade process. For me, I've already upgraded it, so you will get an upgrade warning. So just click upgrade. It's currently in a 2018 version. When it comes up, it'll open up in a 3D view. It'll look like this. So it's just a little building that I thought would be quite useful to, I guess, sort of just to keep things simple. Just to have a look at I guess, the typical process that we would go through, or you would go through, to present a building in Revit. So that in terms of presentation, initially as a series of renders or ray traces. So ultimately, in the assessment task, you're going to produce a series of renders, which you will submit to me for assessment. So I guess the purpose of this little task is to sort of go through the process, the steps involved, to give you an idea of what you need to do in the assessment, so that when it comes time to the assessment, you're not going to open and think, what do I do? Where do I start? And I guess if you were going to present this model, what sort of things would you do to it? Hey?
Colour it, set some shading.
Well, yeah, I mean, the things that come to my mind are assigned materials, you know. So that's one. That's obviously a very important aspect of it. Yeah, we will, and I guess the thing is, what do you do first? And I guess the thing is that you can start assigning materials, but ultimately, what I would do perhaps is think about what do I have to include inside the model or outside the model as additional what is termed content. Okay, so yes, it's a building with a basic topography. So how are the occupants going to get to the building? Are they going to get to it by vehicle? Do they need a road? Do they need a driveway? Do they need pathing? Are you going to enhance the model with trees, fencing? Sorry?
It's a cabin in the woods.
Cabin in the woods, okay. So, yeah, grandma's house. All right. So, yeah, okay. So, vehicular access, a driveway, a car perhaps, people, trees, fencing, additional landscaping, okay, maybe a water feature, I don't know, gardens, garden edging, that type of thing. So in the assessment, I'm looking for all that. So in the assessment, I'm not asking you to go inside the building necessarily, so you don't have to do a lot inside the building. Maybe add lighting inside the building, but I'll talk about that in a later session. but primarily you're going to develop the external aspect of the building for the purpose of presentation, and ultimately you're going to do the external, develop the external, because ultimately the assessment task, the first assessment task, the model that you use in the first assessment task will be used in the second assessment task, which is the animation. So the bulk of the work is done in the first assessment task, okay, i.e. development of the site, the assigning of materials, obviously working out, shadow, sun position, shadow directions and that type of thing. And that's the bulk of the work, and then the animation, really the model is then complete, and you just actually then go through the process of animating it. So over the next few sessions we're just going to develop this little model and sort of go through the natural process. So I guess to begin with, let's think about sort of adding a driveway and pathing perhaps, and how do we do that? Now the thing is that the building itself here has what's called a topography. Now it's probably been quite a while since any of you have actually built or created a topography. Do you want a refresher in topography?
Thank you.
Yeah? Okay. So if you are working with topography, you would typically work in the site view. Now what I'm going to do, we will perhaps make some minor adjustments to this topography. And I guess the thing is that if you're making adjustments to an existing topography, how do you do it? Select it. That's step one. Okay, good. Select it. Okay, if you're going to make a change to the topography, you look for an edit button. So we've got an edit surface, and the edit surface takes it back to these, what they call points. All right, these points that are based on survey data. Now that's okay. We're not going to make any adjustments to the current topography, so I'll get you to actually close that. I'm going to quickly run through the creation of a topography just as a refresher. Not that we're going to keep this or use this, but I just want to go through it, just want to take you through as a refresher. So if you allow yourself some space on the right hand side here to create a second topography, any site related work is undertaken from the Massing and Site tab. So once we've had a look at creating a basic, what they call topo surface, I'll then talk about the other options here for developing the site itself. And I guess the thing is that up front in Revit, in site work, the tools that are available are all quite basic. Okay, I think you can actually get a plugin for Revit called Site Designer, which is free, which allows you greater scope with site development. I've had a quick look at it, and a very quick look, and I closed it back down again because it was frustrating me. So I guess if you are thinking of using Site Designer as a plugin, watch some videos to learn how to use it, because I have no idea at this stage. But the thing is that there are a lot of plugins you can get for Revit that are free for various aspects. Now, to create a topo surface from scratch, click the button, and initially you're placing points. See the point here? So before you place the point, you actually specify the elevation over here. Now, I'm not an expert in surveying or survey data. I know a little bit about it, but essentially there is a lot more to consider with, I guess, producing topo surfaces, particularly when you're translating or you're sort of extracting data from a survey map. But essentially, to create a sloping surface, for instance, you might say start with an elevation of 3,000. So you type that in. And if you're just creating a very sort of square sample of topography, you don't need to put in a lot of data points. You can actually just click one here and one down here, for instance. Okay, so two data points at 3,000. What you can then do is go across up to the elevation option, put in 1,500, for instance, and just add another 2 data points, one here and one here. Go up to the elevation setting up here, type in maybe 500. So we're sort of going, each time we're going lower and lower. Two points there. And if you actually keep the elevation at 500 and put a final couple of points here and here, the topography will obviously level out in this last part. Okay, so the 2 data points, these first 2 were 3,000, the second 2 were 1,500, the third pair were 500, and the fourth pair were 500. So, I mean, if you put that up to say 5,000 and put a point in here, see what happens? Okay, it just pulls it up. Okay. All right. I'm not going to do that. I'll just undo that. So once you've finished putting your points in, you can then finish. So finish surface. And if you have a look at that in 3D, there's your surface. Now, if you select that surface, select the surface, and just come up here to the View panel, click this option here, which is Section Box. So that option puts a section box around the object that you've selected. And if you are just moving these control points in, it's kind of a nice feature, because what it does is it sort of gives the illusion of that topography being solid. So it sort of gives it some boundaries. And the section box itself can be hidden, and you're just left with the topography like that. Now, just we won't have a chance today to do any work on our particular project, but I guess the thing is that once you've got the topography there, I mean, how then do you actually create things like roads and pathing and driveways? And there's a couple of options, and I guess one of the options that you can use is, and if we go back to the site view, one of the options that you can do or one of the options you can use to actually create something like a roadway, for instance, is this option here, which is called subregion. Okay, so it defines an area within a topo surface. And you can see in the video that's playing there, it's perfect for you know, creating things like roads and paths and driveways and things. So if you click that option there, you have all your draw tools available to you. And so let's say, for instance, I start here and I draw to the right, up, across, it doesn't have to be that accurate. It's just to show you, I guess, how it works. So you sketch it out basically on top of your topo surface, then finish. And what it does, if we go back to the 3D view, it creates a subregion which will follow the contours of your topo surface. And let's say, for instance, you select the topo surface itself and change or assign a material of grass. And I'll just perhaps change that to realistic. So we've got the grass there. So I'll just change or just update the render appearance, or just make that actually green. Just so you can see it shaded like that. And then, you know, for instance, if this was a roadway, for instance, you could actually select the subregion separately and assign a material to that, which could be bitumen asphalt. Okay, so, and if I just do just a quick ray trace, so the ray trace at the bottom here as an option. So I know it's a little bit difficult to see there, but so I guess it's just to give you an idea of, or just to begin giving you an idea of what you can do with, or how to create a topo surface, and what you can actually do with it after it's created. So the subregion option, the subregion is a tool that you can use to create things like roads and paths. Now, in our next session, I'll actually show you another technique for creating roads and paths, which runs along the similar sort of vein, but produces them in a completely different way. Okay. So that's where we'll begin our next session. And then I'll talk about maybe adding trees, fencing, cars, people, that type of thing. And then we can perhaps start thinking about adding or assigning materials to the topography, the roads, the road, the path, the driveway, the building itself, the roof, and so forth, and then working towards producing some, or working towards producing renders. Okay, so just the flow or the typical process. All right, so what I'll get you to do is, there's no need to keep this topography that you've just created unless you want to, but we'll just switch to the site view, just select it and delete it. Save the project, just hang on to it. I know that we haven't done anything with it at this stage, but just we'll just pick this up in our next session. All right, thanks everyone. See you then.